Oh, hey guys. You don't know how glad I am to see you here. It's me, Indiana Joyless. Right now I'm looking for this ancient temple about to acquire one of the most priceless artifacts in history, the Dial of Dookie. But while the road there is perilous, it's pretty damn long. Good thing I got you here to keep me company. Now listen up, because I'm about to talk about a topic that I happen to be pretty fond of, the Indiana Jones movies. But first I'm gonna be talking about 5 movies, and at least one of them is probably gonna get this video demonetized, even if I put the border around it. So if you want to support me, I have a Ko-Fi. You can use it to send donations, or if you want to commission me for some art, the commissioning list is right there. You can send me a message there if you want to buy art, or if you want, you could send me a message on Newgrounds, or email me at knucklesthegoomba@gmail.com. But other than that, let's get back to the video. Remember when I said I wanted to talk about more stuff than just video games when I reviewed the Sonic movies? Well, here we are. The big ass Evangelion analysis video is gonna be put on the back burner for now, but lately I've been thinking about these movies an awful lot. After all, I've been getting into the Uncharted series lately, and they announced a new Indiana Jones game, so it only makes sense to revisit the iconic film series and look back on its highs, as well as its lows. So without further ado, let's start with the first movie. But first, a brief history lesson. Indiana Jones is the brainchild of none other than George "I may have gone too far in a few places" Lucas. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were inspired by the 1930s black and white adventure serials they both grew up with. George Lucas's other film series has bits of inspiration from these serials, as well as some other decade-old works mixed in there for good measure. It's pretty obscure. I don't know if any of you have heard about it before. Anyway, fresh after the release of Star Wars 77, George and Steven met up in Hawaii where they exchanged ideas to make a modernized film take on those 30s action-adventure serials. Spielberg wanted to make a James Bond movie, and this was the next best thing, since Spielberg basically described Indiana Jones as James Bond without all the fancy gadgets at his disposal. And so, one deal with Paramount later, they officially started production on Raiders of the Lost Ark. And for what it's worth, it's actually pretty good. This movie isn't perfect by all means, but it's super enjoyable, and it does a great job at selling us on this character and premise. Indiana Jones has it all. He's played by Harrison Ford, one of the most charismatic, suave, and frankly pretty sexy actors of the early 80s. And his overall demeanor and mannerisms fit the character to a T. His look is also undeniably iconic. The jacket, the whip, and of course that iconic hat. These elements combine to make one of the most memorable and fun to watch characters in cinema history. A sly, badass archaeologist who hunts ancient artifacts, punches Nazis, travels the world, gets bitches, and even has a side hustle as a college professor, which kind of makes him feel like a superhero. Like, the university scenes just kind of feel like his secret identity, at least to me. Does anybody else feel like this? No? I might be a little insane. This movie's opening scene introduces him perfectly too. Indy, along with some random guy and Dr. Octopus, search the depths of a South American jungle in search for a golden idol. The random guy tries to shoot Indy before we get our introduction to his whip, disarming him before he steps out of the shadows. Imagine not knowing shit about this character and seeing him for the first time here. Like, damn, this guy looks badass. Also, holy shit, he really is Doc Ock. Look, he hates spiders. Once Indy and Doc Ock make it to the ancient temple, they get through a couple booby traps before they make it to the golden idol. Everything that happens in this scene has been referenced and parodied to death at this point. Indy trying to match the idol's weight with a bag of sand to not trigger any death traps, and the iconic boulder scene is instantly recognizable to anyone on the planet. As iconic as the opening is, it really doesn't have any narrative significance significance other than being our introduction to Indy. That and our introduction to Belloc. You see, these movies have a similar way with how they approach their villains. You have the leader, the one who's interested in finding it for the archaeological sense of it all, and the big brute whose only purpose is to give Indy a cool fight scene before dying a painful death. Belloc falls under the second category, which we'll discuss a little later. For now, Indy surrenders the idol before making his escape. We also get to see one of the more comedic quirks to his character, his fear of snakes.
There's a big snake in the plane, Jock! Oh, that's just my pet snake, Reggie!
Speaking of which, now's a good time to bring up that these movies tend to be insanely funny.
This is a castle, and we have many tapestries. And if you are a Scottish lord, then
I am Mickey Mouse!
How dare he?
The best way I can describe the humor is like characters' personalities clashing with some minor slapstick. I just think all the actors in these movies have great chemistry together, and their line deliveries are what makes the comedy so special. Also, Harrison Ford has a really funny yell.
You're great! Don't wait for me! Those people are trying to kill us! I know, Dad! We are going to die!
As discussed before, when he isn't going on crazy adventures, he's teaching archaeology in college. Here's where we're introduced to Indy's friend Marcus Brody, who doesn't really do shit in this movie, but he's gonna be more prominent later. Anyway, here's where we get the main plot of the movie. Indy has to find the Ark of the Covenant out in the desert before the Nazis do. The way they talk about the Ark is great. They build up intrigue, talking about the power it holds and the historical and biblical significance behind it, how it was used to hold the original 10 Commandments, and that the Bible described the Ark destroying entire civilizations. But before that, he has to go traveling, looking for clues and hints as to where it's buried. So one iconic map montage later, Indy lands in Nepal. And speaking of the montage, let's talk about the music. It's unsurprisingly really good and full of adventure thanks to the legendary John Williams. Williams gives everything their own little musical cue, and it makes every score sound so unique and beautiful. His other soundtracks like Star Wars, Home Alone 1 and 2, Superman, hell, even fucking Harry Potter has good music. And that's the only time I'll ever compliment something Potter related ever again. Anyway, back to the plot. Indy goes to Nepal where he meets his old mentor's daughter and this movie's love interest, Marion Ravenwood. Yeah, Indy is supposed to be a badass 80s action hero, so of course he has to get the girl. Okay, for what it's worth, I think Marion is a pretty good character. She's feisty, she's kind of an asshole, she likes to drink, but she has a soft side to her. She's kind of a damsel distress later on, but spoiler alert, so is Indy. Anyway, her introduction has her win a drinking contest against Ronald McDonald. Indy meets up with her because she has the top medallion part of the staff needed to reveal the location of the Ark. She doesn't agree to help Indy at first, but after Nazis come in and the whole bar is burnt to the ground, she demands to tag along. Now we're in Cairo, Egypt, where we meet Salah, played by Man Ray from SpongeBob. After more talk about the Ark and a cute scene with the monkey, we find out that the monkey is a Nazi. This is inaccurate because in real life, monkeys are actually smarter than that. Whatever, now it's time for some funny slapstick.
That was kind of funny.
So anyway, Marion dies. For real. Not clickbait. Honestly, I can't tell if this fake out is any good since I've seen this movie countless times and I just know she doesn't die. It's probably not a good one though since we barely spent any time with her beforehand. But anyway, Indy's now really sad about it and he goes to a bar to get drunk where Belloc comes back. Like I said earlier, Belloc is in it for the historical significance of the Ark. He talks about it with such intrigue, going as far as saying he and Indy aren't that different. All things considered, this scene is pretty good, but I thought the kids coming in to save Indy was a little corny and random. I don't know. Back at Salah's place, they finally decipher what the staff's headpiece says, and it reveals the exact length of the staff with vital information on the back, basically saying it's slightly shorter than what the front says. They need this to reveal where the Ark is, and since Belloc's replica headpiece doesn't have the back message, the Nazis are thankfully digging in the wrong place. I also like how each time they discuss the Ark, the wind acts up and the sky gets all stormy. It's like God is getting angry that they're meddling with forces they don't understand. Next morning, Indy and Sala sneak into the Nazi digging site and enter the secret room to find out where the Ark is. Once the sun hits the staff, a beam of light pinpoints the Ark's exact location. Indy jots it down and he breaks the staff. Meanwhile, Sala rolls down the hill like a fucking idiot and comes back to pull Indy out of the room with a bunch of clothes tied together. I also think the cinematography is worth pointing out. There's been lots of pretty shots so far. Once Indy gets out, he finds out that Marion is still alive. What a shocker. He can't rescue her just yet though. He's gotta get the Ark and leave with her so the bad guys don't get suspicious yet. Speaking of which, while the Nazis waste time digging holes in the desert, Indiana Jones walks over to the correct location, followed by the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Hey, wait a minute. The crew spends the entire afternoon digging, and we fade into the evening where the sky looks as stormy as ever. Eventually, they hit a stone, and moving it reveals a temple. Unfortunately for Indy, the temple is filled with snakes. Meanwhile, Belloc has no luck finding the Ark, so he decides to interrogate Marion in the nicest way possible. He brings her food and water, and he even gives her a pretty dress to wear. That's nice. But it's also pretty creepy since he looks at her changing clothes without her consent.
Whoa, hey.
After all this time, we finally get to see the Ark of the Covenant. Indy does the smart thing by using lit torches to repel the snakes, which is cool. Unfortunately, Belloc crashes the party and takes the Ark, leaving Indy and Marion to die in the snake hole. Fortunately, Indy tears off parts of Marion's dress to fuel the torches, and he tips over one of the jackal statues to find an escape route. Also, Jesus, sometimes these movies can get a little scary, especially this one. There's plenty of nightmare fuel sprinkled throughout, like in this moment here, and another one later that used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid. But for now, it's time for another creative and funny action scene. After all that, the heroes finally have the Ark and they make their way back to America. Indy was hurt pretty badly in that last battle, so Marion has to tend to his wounds, and I actually really like this scene. We never got to actually slow down, and it's nice to see these two characters just chill. They even get to squeeze in a little joke.
What'd you say?
I also appreciate that the Ark burned through the crate just so it could cover up the swastika. That way I don't have to censor it. So, thanks God. Speaking of swastikas, Belloc is back.
If it's your goal, go in peace with it, but leave us the girl. It would reduce our loss on this trip.
Savage.
That's gotta be racist.
Belloc takes the Ark and kidnaps Marion, but Indy sneaks aboard the Nazi ship. In order to open the Ark to reveal the power stored inside, they take it to a small island. I also think this joke where Indy knocks out a thug just to see that his clothes were way too small, only to then get confronted with a bigger thug, was pretty funny. Once they make it to the island, Indy threatens to blow up the Ark if they don't surrender Marion, but Belloc calls his bluff, knowing he won't blow up the Ark since it's just too important. So now we make it to the climax where Indy and Marion are tied to a post while the Nazis open the Ark. If you ask me, this scene is easily the best scene in the movie, and again, it used to scare the fuck out of me when I was little. When they open it, all they see is just sand, when suddenly all their technology fucks up and some Old Testament spirits flutter around the scene. Since Indy tells Marion to shut her eyes, they're both spared from the consequences of the arrogant Nazis' actions. Suddenly the spirits get angry, the music switches from mysterious to creepy, the spirits' faces switch from human faces to ominous skeletons, and all the Nazis instantly die, except for the main villains, who have the privilege of suffering. I should also point out that the effects are pretty good, especially for 1981. After that explosive climax, Indy finally retrieves the Ark, and the government sends it to the archives so it can never get in the wrong hands again. Indy's upset that the Ark is stashed away instead of being preserved in a museum, but he has a neat little ending with Marion and the credits roll. So yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Even if it's not the best movie in the series, it's still a great first installment to the series and a great movie on its own. The strongest parts are easily the adventure itself, the comedy, and of course the music. Character work is something I definitely think the movie faltered in. Just a little bit. But nevertheless, the characters are compelling enough for the movie to still be fun to watch. At its worst, it can get a little simple, but at its best, it's heartwarming, action-packed, and funny as hell. And the best things about this movie would return later on to be built upon. So yeah, this movie was pretty good. But the next one isn't. You know, it's kind of funny how Lucas didn't want Ford to play Indy at first since he was already Han Solo, but Spielberg convinced George otherwise, saying he fit the role. Man, can you imagine how the movie would be if Indy was played by somebody else? Like, I don't know, John Candy?
It looks like the Temple of Doom.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is whatever. Like, it's decent, I guess. Before we tear into this one, we have to understand why it's the way it is. And it's pretty simple, really. Obviously, The Empire Strikes Back had a darker tone than the original Star Wars, so George felt it was only necessary for the second Indiana Jones movie to be darker than the original as well. Also, both George and Steven were going through divorces, so this movie is as grumpy as them. So yeah, this movie is absolutely miserable. People really liked it when it was out, but looking at it nowadays, it's pretty weak compared to the others. Funnily enough, I think one of the first people to actually criticize the movie for what it was the Nostalgia Critic. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for a sequel having a much darker tone than its predecessor, but Temple of Doom just feels like a really weird and edgy detour that has no impact on the whole series whatsoever. I mean, if I was paired up with an annoying, insensitive bimbo and I had to jump off a plane and land in India only to meet an extremely racist depiction of Indian culture before going underground to find a satanic cult, I'd definitely try to forget about the whole experience as soon as possible too. Yeah, I should probably talk about what happens in this movie, huh? This movie doesn't open like an Indiana Jones movie, but rather a Muppet movie. Actually, jokes aside, I kinda fuck with it. After the musical number, we finally get to see Indiana Jones. Since this movie is a prequel, Indy is a little inexperienced compared to Raiders, and unfortunately there's only like 2 action scenes. Great. Anyway, Indy is trying to talk this Lao Chi guy into giving him a rare jewel, and here's where we're introduced to one of the movie's worst characters, Willie. Everyone has clowned on her for decades, saying she's the most annoying character in the series and she doesn't do anything to impact the plot. And I wholeheartedly agree. She's fucking terrible.
You bring me Nuhachi.
Who on earth is this Nurhachi? This Nurhachi's a real small guy.
Shut the hell up.
I guess the intent was to make a character who was the polar opposite to Marion. Where Marion was a middle-class brunette who didn't take shit from anyone and was a good character, Willie is a rich blonde who doesn't care about anyone but herself, and she spends half of the movie's runtime screaming her head off.
I hate the water! And I hate being wet! And I hate you!
And yeah, one could argue that she's a normal person in these wacky situations and she is out of her element and all, but counterpoint, I don't like her and I think she's annoying and dumb and she's a poopy head. After Willie gives us a free sample of her buffet of annoyance, Lao Chi reveals that he poisoned Indy and he'll give him the antidote if Indy gives back the jewel.
Don't worry, Wuhan, I'll get you out of here.
Not this time, Indy. I followed you on many adventures.
Who the fuck are you?
This next scene is an action scene where Indy tries to fight off Lao Chi's thugs while scrambling for the antidote. Immediately, you'll notice that this scene is not as good as the opening from Raiders. It's just goofy, especially when a bunch of fucking balloons pop up, no pun intended. But as much as I'm bitching, I don't think this opening is horrible. It's just okay. And that's a problem since Raiders set the bar pretty fucking high. I guess at the end of the day, this opening still does a good job at establishing the tone, and that tone is mediocre. After Indy and William escape with Lao Chi's men chasing after them, we're introduced to another new character, Short Round, who I actually like. Unlike Steamboat Willie. Short Round is kinda like this movie's equivalent to Sala. He brightens up any scene he's in. But while Sala did that by being a really positive and chill guy, Short Round just does that by being adorable. He's also pretty useful knowing how to drive a car, and he can put up a good fight despite being a child. And all in all, I like the idea of Indy having a kid sidekick, and I think the movie would have been a lot better if it was just centered around them. I also would have preferred if Short Round was in more fucking movies, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. It's also worth mentioning that his actor, Ke Huy Quan, went on to be in other better movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Seeing him win that Oscar for that was really nice to see. It was also nice to see him reunite with Indiana Jones. I feel like I'm getting off topic. Anyway, after the good guys make their escape, we see that the plane they're on is actually owned by Lao Chi, so the pilots abandon them when they fly over the Himalayas. Waking up just in time, Indy decides to use a fucking inflatable raft as a parachute. It really is annoying that people gave shit to the fridge scene in Crystal Skull, but they just ignore this scene, which is arguably much stupider. They would not be able to survive this drop. I've seen Indy kill people by shoving them off cliffs as big as that one. But anyway, we see that our heroes quite literally fall into the main plot when they come across a starving Indian village. Will.i.am is rude as hell for refusing their food, and Indy even calls her out for this.
I can't eat this.
That's more food than these people eat in a week. They're starving.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can have
Eat it.
I'm not hungry.
You're insulting them and you're embarrassing me.
Also, semi-unrelated, when I watched this movie with my boyfriend, I told him there was a pretty racist scene with how they portray Indian food. He's not Indian, he's from the UAE, so he's basically in the same ballpark, so to speak. He thought I was talking about this scene, and he said I was wrong. Oh boy. How do we tell him? Yeah, this movie gets pretty racist later on, but for now I think the Indian villagers are portrayed just fine. Only weird thing is that some of them are obviously dubbed. When you notice it, it's really distracting. This guy is dubbed over by Fozzie Bear.
They took the stone from here.
And this kid is dubbed over by Daisy Duck.
They will make me drink the blood of the Kali. Then I'll fall into the black sleep of the Kali Ma.
I can't help but wonder why. Is it because they didn't sound Indian enough? One of you has to explain yourselves. Back to the plot, the village chief asks Indy to go to Pankot Palace to help find the village's sacred magical rock, because without it, they've been deprived of any food or water. And to make matters worse, all the children are missing. So on their way to Delhi, Indy and Short Round agree to help the village, and Will Ferrell gets bullied by an elephant. She's still annoying as hell, but seeing her suffering makes me happy, so I honestly can't get too mad. This next scene is a little cute, but also really fucking annoying. The trio stops traveling for the night, so Indy and Short Round play a game of cards while each of them calls the other one out for cheating. Okay, sweet. But meanwhile, Will Smith gets bullied by every animal in the jungle while she screams her vocal cords out again. Seriously, why are there so many different animals in this specific part of the jungle? The only funny scene with her is when a snake slithers onto her shoulder, and instead of getting scared again, she thinks it's the elephant, so she just grabs it and throws it away while Indy gets horrified. But Ori and the Willy of the Wisps, yes, I'm running out of puns, isn't why this scene is funny. It's Indy's fear of snakes. Anyway, they finally make it to Pankot Palace. Let the racism begin!
I had bugs for lunch. Excuse me, sir. Do you have anything simple, like soup?
Dessert. Chilled monkey brain.
Good times. After that, we get this scene where the movie tries to attempt romantic tension between these two, and we feel absolutely nothing. William Tell Overture even calls Indy her little palace slave.
Oh, you're very nice, ma'am. Maybe you could be my palace slave.
God, I hate rich people. I also don't like this scene where the both of them are waiting for the other one to go into their room. It's a waste of time, much like the movie as a whole. Can something exciting just happen already?
I can't believe I'm not going.
Oh, that's better. After Indy and Short Round kill this guy, Indy goes into Will Arnett's room and investigates the room, doing literally anything but pay attention to her. Touching the statue's boobs reveals a secret passage, and Indy and Short Round find themselves in a booby trap. This scene also makes me really uncomfortable whenever I see it. I fucking hate bugs. But other than that, the booby trap ceiling scene is alright. After Robin Williams saved them from the trap, the trio did drugs so they went to hell before they died. We're introduced to the main villains, a cult of devil worshippers holding a stupid human sacrifice. Whenever I watch this movie, I always come prepared. Afterward, we see that the cult took the stones needed to save the village, and after Indy sneaks in to retrieve them, we see that the cult enslaved all the village's children. At this point, we're about halfway over, I think. And it might become apparent that this movie doesn't feel adventurous enough. Anyway, the cultists capture the good guys. Billy D. Williams is gonna be sacrificed. Short Round is enslaved, and they plan on brainwashing Indy to join their little team. We also get told that the kids are digging for the remaining 2 stones, meaning that there were originally 5. And this is just a me thing, and I know I'm risking sounding like an annoying 80s mom, but I really don't vibe with the villains, if that wasn't already apparent. I'm kind of a woman of faith, so I can't help but feel a little off-put by this guy. And not only does he insult my religion, but everybody else's too.
The British in India will be slaughtered. Then we will overrun the Muslims. Then the Hebrew God will fall. And then the Christian God will be cast down and forgotten.
That's for blasphemy.
Okay, I will give credit where it's due. Indy getting brainwashed is horrifying and well acted, until it isn't. After he becomes evil, he just does this goofy little smile. I just can't help but laugh every time I see it. My man went from struggling beyond comprehension to just... Anyway, now it's time for William after— no, fuck that, I'm not referencing that. It's time to sacrifice Willie. See, I'm conflicted. On one hand, these villains suck ass, but on the other hand, they're about to kill Willie. I don't know who I should root for. But thankfully, Short Round breaks free from his shackles and snaps Indy back to reality. And by snap, I mean burn. After Indy beats up some guys, they take the stones and make their escape, but not until we indulge in this movie's brute fight. We also see that the prince from earlier was also brainwashed and uses a voodoo doll to slow Indy down, but Short Round also snaps the prince back to reality and the brute gets crushed to death, and Willie does not do shit. Now that all the slaves run free, the gang escape in a minecart, and some people swear by this scene, saying this is the best scene in the entire franchise. Man, I don't know. Have you seen the next movie? This scene is just okay, maybe a little overrated and boring. It's a little hard to get invested in this movie, especially towards the end. Afterward, the characters make it to a flimsy wooden bridge, kickstarting the most overused cliche in fiction. As per tradition, the bridge breaks and the characters hold on for dear life once Indy breaks the bridge with a sword. Some thugs fall down and get eaten by crumlings, and the ram guy tries to rip Indy's heart out but fails. Once Indy chants the incantation, 2 of the stones fall down while the ram guy tries to save the last one but burns his hand and he falls down. Now that the stone and the children are returned to the village, everything's a lot more colorful and prosperous, while Indy says he understands the stone's power, which doesn't make a lot of sense considering he said he didn't believe in the supernatural in Raiders.
Yes. I understand its power now.
Marcus, what are you trying to do? Scare me? You sound like my mother. We've known each other for a long time. I don't believe in magic, a lot of superstitious hocus pocus.
But anyway, Willie acts annoying again, but Indy still kisses her because he's obligated to get the girl, even if the girl is insufferable as hell. Credits roll. Yeah, I didn't really like this one. In terms of pacing, cinematography, writing, and music, things could definitely be a lot worse. It's still competently well put together, but it's just not fun to watch. It doesn't feel as adventurous, and it just feels like a waste of time. While the other movies are globe-trotting adventures with a healthy mix of character moments and action set pieces, there's a lot of meandering in Temple of Doom. There's some things I still like about it, like Indy saving the village and the presence of Short Round, but But hey, in the next movie, they did what this movie should have done. They took what worked from the first movie, and they made it the best thing ever. This is the best Indiana Jones movie. No contest. After the deserved critical reception of Temple of Doom, Spielberg didn't want to come back to the series, and he wanted to focus his efforts on only the most respected and prestigious works of art in the film industry, like The Big Friendly Giant. Oh, and Schindler's List, I guess. But he ultimately decided on returning to make The Last Crusade in order to fulfill his promise to George Lucas to make it a trilogy. George thought it'd be interesting to have this adventure be centered around the Holy Grail. What Steven brought to the table was the relationship between Indy and his father, which worked out super well in the end since it fits perfectly with the story of the Holy Grail. Steven also wanted this one to be a little more similar to Raiders of the Lost Ark, with returning side characters like Marcus and Sala. Okay, without further ado, here's my favorite Steven Spielberg movie, as well as one of my favorite movies of all time, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Before I get started, I should probably talk about what I don't like about this movie. Okay, now time for everything I do like. This movie easily has the best opening in the whole series. It's a flashback to Indy's teen years, and we get to see the origin of so many things. His whip, his chin scar, his fear of snakes, which also shows him being indifferent to snakes earlier, his love for adventure, and even his hat. But they establish he already has his love for archaeology, so when he sees a band of thieves for hire discover the Cross of Coronado, he leaps into action, taking back the cross and attempting to outrun the thieves. The chase takes them to a circus train where we see most of this unfold. Eventually, young Indy gives the thieves the slip and runs home to tell his dad. Again, you'll notice that much like the other films, this flashback is somewhat disconnected to the main plot, but it foreshadows the Holy Grail when we catch a glimpse of Indy's dad studying it. We also get a taste of their relationship, which is a little strained. Anyway, once the sheriff makes it to the Jones residence, he states that the thief is the rightful owner to the crucifix and he won't press charges if Indy gives it back. The gang's leader expresses admiration for Indy's sense of good and he gives him the iconic fedora. Immediately afterward, we cut to Indy as an adult in the middle of another adventure to retrieve the same cross, this time against the guy who hired those thieves all those years ago. After he ordered his men to throw Indy overboard, Indy uses his wit and surroundings to quickly win the battle, retrieving the cross and blowing the ship up in the process. Again, like the other movies, the opening does a fantastic job at telling us what kind of movie this will be, and that is the best one in the series. It's well-paced, action-packed, well-written, funny, and the first 10 minutes are already much better than the entirety of Temple of Doom. Now we're back in Indy's college where he explains the meaning of archaeology to his students before class is dismissed, and we get another conversation between Indy and Marcus, who's more involved in this movie, but we'll talk about that later. For now, Indy gets a mysterious package from Venice, Italy, but he has to sneak out of his office if he wants a moment of peace from his students outside. On the road, he gets confronted by Walter Donovan, Henry Sr.'s financial backer. Donovan explains that Indy's dad, who I'm just gonna call Henry for simplicity's sake, has mysteriously disappeared in the middle of his search for the Holy Grail. According to Donovan, Henry already found half of the sacred tablet used in the Crusades for the Cup of Christ, and he briefly tells Indy the story of said Crusades. As I explain more of the plot, you'll start to see that this movie easily has the most compelling mystery in the entire series. After Indy agrees to find his dad and continue the search for the Grail, he and Marcus head over to Henry's house, which was ransacked earlier that day. After Marcus points out that the mail was opened, Indy opens the package he got earlier, which was Henry's diary containing all the Grail research. One thing's for sure, they had to go to Venice. One map montage later, they meet Donovan's assistant, Elsa, who secretly ends up being a Nazi. All the blonde women in this universe are evil. Once in Venice, the gang go to the library where Henry was last seen, which Marcus points out
looks like a converted church.
Next, they use the diary to continue the search for the Grail. On the stained glass window, there's Roman numerals for 3, 7, and 10, as well as in the diary. The pillars nearby have the Roman numerals for 3 and 7, and Indy finds the 10 on the floor. Also, I think the joke where Indy destroys the tiles to go underground and it's perfectly timed with the librarian was really funny.
Oh my god, it's Albert Einstein!
After going underground, Indy and Elsa discover that this is the tomb of Sir Richard, one of the knights searching for the Holy Grail during the First Crusade. Sir Richard's shield has the same pattern as the tablet at Donovan's place, and completing Henry's rubbing of the tablet reveals the name Alexandretta. We also get a cheeky nod to the Ark of the Covenant. Meanwhile, back in the library, a group of shady men knock Marcus unconscious and set the petroleum-filled tomb ablaze. All the rats underground run for cover, and Indy Indy and Elsa hide underneath a raft. After finding a secret way out through the sewer, Indy and Elsa get chased by the men. Also, like I said earlier, the action is really compelling in this movie. It's thrilling as hell, and it's a perfect blend of off-the-wall spectacle and just a hint of slapstick. The action is so good, I just can't help but laugh every 5 seconds whenever I rewatch this movie. But afterward, Indy pins down one of the men, forcing him to give him answers before the guy convinces him to take this conversation elsewhere, which is when Elsa drives a boat nearby to take them back to the docks. Here we learn that this guy, named Chasm, is part of the Brotherhood of the Crucifix, and he only attacked them because they were looking for the Grail, which Indy denies, saying he was only looking for his father. Chasm wishes them luck, and he reveals that Henry is being held in a German castle. Back at the hotel, we get another conversation between Indy and Marcus where they figure out that Alexandretta is the name of the city where they should begin their quest for the Grail, which was really the only thing left to figure out because Henry's diary has literally every piece of information about the Grail except where to start. Afterward, Indy discovers that both his and Elsa's room were ransacked, much like Henry's house from earlier. Whatever, it's time for Indy and Elsa to start having sex. This romance may seem a little half-baked, but that's okay because, again, spoilers, Elsa's a bad guy. Anyway, Indy and Elsa go to the castle to find Henry while Marcus gets a head start to Alexandretta, with Indy having the diary and Marcus having the map. Once they sneak into the castle, we find out that Henry was kidnapped by the Nazis, and after all this time, we finally get to meet Henry Jones Sr., and he whacks his son over the head with a vase. And of course, Henry is one of the reasons why this movie works so well. In his introductory scene, we learn so much about him. Like his son, archaeology is his life. He's overjoyed when Indy and him start to bond over the progress Indy's made with finding the Grail. And over the course of the film, we get to know why the relationship was so jaded, what happened to Indy's mom, and damn it, it's satisfying to see them grow closer and drop the petty grudges they have with each other. We also see that adventuring isn't exactly Henry's comfort zone, since he's shocked when Indy grabs George Clooney's gun and shoots all the Nazis with it before spouting a cool action movie one-liner.
I told you! Don't call me Junior. That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Afterward, we finally get the twist that Elsa is in fact evil. By extension, Donovan is in fact also evil. He wants the Grail for himself, so he steals the diary and ties the Jones boys up. There's pages missing, but Elsa deduces they gave the pages to Marcus. So yeah, this is Marcus's first time out on the field with Indy, and he bumbles around like a fucking idiot. And I actually don't mind this. It would make sense for him not to be his usual calm, collected self when he's out of his element. And besides, it's really funny seeing him, well, act like a fucking idiot. But just like Marcus, the audience is happy to see that Sala is back. But unfortunately, the Nazis are also back. So now Sala desperately tries to hint at Marcus to run before realizing, oh wait, Marcus is stupid. So he flat out yells at him to run before punting a Nazi in the face, and Marcus hides inside a... oh. Never mind. Once they're alone, Henry tries to reach for Indy's lighter to burn through the ropes, but he burns his finger and drops it, setting fire to the floor, forcing the boys to move. After more hilarious action, the boys escape through a secret door into a dock before tricking the Nazis by turning one of the boats on and escaping into a motorcycle. I know, I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but oh my god, the action! Can you guys tell I'm just trying not to play every possible clip from this movie? It's all just so fucking good. If you haven't seen it yet, you're wasting your goddamn time. But I want more precious watch hours, so stay right where you are. After they lose the Nazis, Indy wants to go to Alexandria to reunite with Marcus before Henry says they need to go back to Berlin to retrieve the diary since it has bits of information crucial to finding the Grail, stuff that the map doesn't tell them. After we get another small argument from the Joneses, they make it to Berlin for the local anime convention, filled with arrogant fascists and a lot of swastikas to censor. Give me a break, George, come on. After Indy pulls a Darth Vader on Elsa, he retrieves the diary and accidentally gets an autograph from... oh, give me 1 second, hold on. Indy gets an autograph from Joe Biden. After retreating from the anime convention, the two of them sneak onto the next blimp out of Germany. One of the Nazi officers tries to look for Henry, but Indy, disguised as one of the pilots, decks him in the face and pushes him out of the window with the funniest possible justification.
No ticket.
It was kind of funny.
Afterward, they have one of the best written conversations in the movie where Indy expresses his regret for not being closer to his dad, and Henry says he wanted Indy to be more independent. Again, holy fuck, it's so good. Just watch this shit.
It was just the two of us, Dad. It was a lonely way to grow up. For you, too. If you'd been an ordinary average father like the other guys' dads, you'd have understood that.
Actually, I was a wonderful father. Did I ever tell you to eat up, go to bed, wash your ears, do your homework? No, I respected your privacy, and I taught you self-reliance.
What you taught me was that I was less important to you than people who'd been dead for 500 years in another country. And I learned it so well that we've hardly spoken for 20 years.
Also random, but it's cool that they got Sean Connery, who played James Bond, to play the father of Indiana Jones, since James Bond was the main inspiration for Indiana Jones in the first place. It's all come full circle, which is an unintentionally good segue to where the blimp goes full circle, heading back to Berlin, where Indy and his dad quickly escape on a plane, and we get another great action scene. It takes us from the sky to the ground, since Henry is horrible at aiming, to a car chase through a tunnel, but only for a brief moment since another plane bombs the ground to get the car trapped in a pothole, and it ends where Henry gets the bright idea to make a flock of pelicans fly into the incoming plane, causing it to crash. It's pretty satisfying. I will say though, the green screen is a little noticeable. It was also present in the others. I don't know why I'm pointing it out now, but whatever. Meanwhile, Donovan gets reinforcements, specifically horses and tanks, and the Nazis make their way to the Canyon of the Crescent Moon, the secret location to the Temple of the Cup of Christ. Fortunately, Indy, Henry, and Sala make their way to rescue Marcus. Here, an insane action scene happens. Indy rides on horseback like a cowboy trying to rescue his friend from the tanks. The Nazi guy questions why Henry needs the diary for the trip. Kazim, yeah, remember him, dies. Henry squirts someone with a pen, and Indy has an epic last stand against the Nazi guy before saving Marcus and Henry by making sure they get off the tank before it drives off a cliff in PNG form. The rest of the gang thinks Indy died, but nah, he's okay. Wait, actually, wait. Okay, now he's okay. Alright, now we're approaching the climax, and you know, while rewatching these movies, I had to jot down little notes about what happens throughout, since I can be a little forgetful and all. But the climax to this movie is something that I know by heart. I wholeheartedly believe that the climax to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is the best scene in the entire series. So let's dive right in. At long last, our heroes make it to their destination, the end of the Canyon of the Crescent Moon. Upon entering the temple, they discover that the Nazis beat them to it, but they seem to be having trouble with booby traps. Upon getting spotted, our heroes are held at gunpoint by Donovan and his crew, where they once again remind us of his goal, achieving immortality. Suddenly, time is running out. Donovan shot Henry in the stomach, and the only thing that can save him is the healing power of the Holy Grail. In an urgent effort to save his father, Indy uses his father's knowledge, as well as his own brain power, to crack the code of these deadly obstacles.
First, the breath of God. Only the penitent man will pass. Second, the word of God. Only in the footsteps of God will he proceed. Third, the path of God. Only in the leap from the lion's head will he prove his worth.
Now Indy has finally made it to the final, unofficial challenge. He finds himself in a room full of chalices. In the middle, there's an elderly knight, one of the original knights during the First Crusade. He's remained in the temple to guard the Holy Grail, being alive for centuries thanks to the power of the Grail. He's shrouded in a staggeringly desaturated blue to signify he's a relic from an era long gone. Followed by Indy is Donovan, blinded by his lust for power, and Elsa, determined to possibly make things right for Indy. In order to obtain the gift of immortality, the Grail Knight tells them to choose wisely. Elsa chooses the wrong cup on purpose to get rid of Donovan in a horrifying manner. However, Indy knows that the cup of Jesus Christ wouldn't be one made of gold or covered in jewels. It would be a little more humble than that. It would have to look like a cup from the son of a carpenter. Indy grabs the most humble cup in the room and tests it out, which thankfully ends up being the correct choice. Indy hurries back to save his dying father after the Grail Knight warns him not to take the Grail beyond the Great Seal. Upon making it back to the entrance, Indy saves his father with the healing powers of the divine. He gives his father a drink from the cup before pouring the rest of the water on his gunshot wound, instantly healing him and seemingly dissolving the bullet entirely. But then greed starts to blind Elsa. She arrogantly takes the Grail beyond the boundary, causing the temple to collapse. As it does, the Grail falls down the cliff, just out of reach for Elsa. She ignores Indy's instructions to give him her other hand, and she falls to her death. Indy also falls down, and he almost meets the same fate until Henry does something unexpected. Throughout the whole movie, he's been calling his son Junior, and Indy really doesn't like that. But this all changes when Henry calls him Indiana.
I can get it. I can almost reach it, Dad.
Indiana? Indiana? Let it go.
Indy finally grabs onto his father, letting go of the Grail, and by extension, his resentment against his father. With the Nazis defeated and the Joneses being a happy family once again, our heroes ride off into the sunset while the credits start to roll. A perfect ending to a perfect movie. Man, what a movie. Not only did it give us everything we adored about Raiders of the Lost Ark, but they gave us so much more. The action is creative and entertaining. The jokes are simply hilarious. The mystery is compelling for both first-time viewers and long-time fans. And, of course, the evolving relationship between Henry Jones Jr. and Sr. is what really makes this movie all come together. There's virtually no flaws in this movie, in my opinion. It's the perfect Indiana Jones movie, and the perfect way to end the trilogy. But as we know, it's not the end of the saga.
I liked it.
You know, I have massive respect for George Lucas. After all, Star Wars and Indiana Jones are two of my favorite film franchises of all time. Sadly, not all of those ideas are particularly good. Obviously, George has been trying to make a fourth movie work for quite a while. There's been plenty of scrapped ideas, like Indy going to China to meet the Monkey King. Eventually, George settled on paying homage to science fiction movies from the 50s, since this movie would take place in the 50s. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room now. This would be an Indiana Jones movie with aliens.
I don't really want this.
Again, not all of George's ideas are good ones. Even Steven Spielberg thought it was stupid as fuck. But he and George compromised by making them interdimensional beings, whatever that's supposed to mean. Now, looking past the fact that the existence of aliens in the Indiana Jones universe is beyond stupid, this movie is actually not that bad in my opinion. It was shat on pretty hard when it came out, but now that we have a movie that's even worse, people stopped being blindly harsh towards Crystal Skull and started to welcome whatever it brought to the table. This basically still feels like an Indiana Jones movie, and I'd say that this movie is almost on par with Raiders or Last Crusade. Okay, maybe not Last Crusade, but you know, you get my point. Obviously, those two are still better in every way, but at least Crystal Skull is leagues better than Temple of Doom. Yeah, I said it. So, let's discuss. For one, the opening is actually pretty good, solely because it sets the time period perfectly. We aren't in World War II anymore. Russian soldiers, atomic bombs, greasers, and the United States government being extremely paranoid perfectly puts Indiana Jones in the 50s, especially the opening where these teens try to race with the Russian soldiers out in the desert. I also really like this bar fight from later on. My only nitpick with the opening is that it immediately gets on with the Crystal Skull stuff. In the other movies, they wanted to start with something unrelated to set the tone before slowly introducing the MacGuffin to build intrigue. Now we're immediately looking for the skull. But let's get back to the plot. After we get reintroduced to Indy, we see that these Russian soldiers are infiltrating the top secret base where the US government stashes all the artifacts Indy finds. Led by Irana Spanko, the Spalko! The Russians kidnapped Indy so he could lead them to a mummified alien from the Roswell incident. We once again see Indy's ingenuity on full display when he uses gunpowder and shotgun shells to locate it, since the mummified alien is highly magnetic. Okay, time to shit a little bit on this movie. This guy is Mac. He fucking sucks.
Why, Mac?
Yeah, what can I say, Jonesy?
He's introduced as Indy's friend, I guess, and when Indy tries to escape from the Russians, he reveals himself to be a double agent and double crosses him. Like, okay. Again, we don't know who this guy is. He just showed up and outed himself as a dick. I also hate how we have to go through this, no, after all we've been through together crap again. It didn't work in Temple of Doom, and it doesn't work here. Last Crusade had a moment of betrayal, but it's a little more impactful because we actually spent time with Elsa beforehand. Whatever, it's time for Indy to beat up some guys.
Damn, I thought that was closer.
It was kind of funny.
I should probably also mention that this movie is maybe a little bit overly reliant on CGI. They still mostly use practical effects, so thank God it's not prequel levels of CG use, but it's still really noticeable. We have CGI prairie dogs, CGI made-up technology like this rocket thingy that goes super fast, and the deforestation-inator. Look at this shot from the opening. This is so obviously green screened. I swear I like this movie. Okay, now it's time for the infamous atomic bomb scene. Indy tries to find refuge in this neighborhood, but everything seems off. It's super quiet, and upon looking at the people, they're all mannequins. Then a countdown begins, and Indy finds refuge in a refrigerator just before the fake neighborhood goes up in an atomic explosion. Now, okay, yeah. Like many people have pointed out before, this wouldn't be possible in real life, and it's very silly, but these movies aren't exactly grounded in reality. Again, this is the same series where he uses a fucking raft as a parachute. The fridge is arguably less stupid than that. I also feel like everyone got too pissy about the fridge thing to appreciate this gorgeous shot. Back to my setting the time period talk, nothing does that more effectively than Indiana Jones staring at a mushroom cloud. And then we immediately cut to the government giving Indy a bubble bath. Now we start to see that things in Indy's life are kinda going to shit. The government suspects he's a communist, the university basically lets him go, and worst of all, Marcus and Henry Jones Sr. are both dead.
Brutal couple of years, huh, Charlie? First Dad, then Marcus.
Seem to have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away.
Normally, I don't like when Hollywood randomly decides to make legacy characters' lives the most miserable thing ever when they revive IPs, but it's a little believable here, and it's satisfying to see how Indy's life gets better at the end. Speaking of which, enter Mutt, played by that guy from those Transformer movies. Mutt informs Indy that a former colleague of his is being held hostage by the Russians because he found a crystal skull in Peru. After a cool chase scene I mentioned before, they head off to Peru in search for more answers. You know, I honestly don't mind Mutt all that much. Again, this movie is overhated, and I think he's a little overhated. His actor can go to hell, but the character, he's fine. This is my video. Fuck you. Whatever. It's time for Indy to beat up some guys again. After the duo is captured by the Russians, they're reunited with Mac, the aforementioned former colleague Oxley, and surprisingly, Marion Ravenwood. What's she doing here, you might ask? I don't know, they never tell us.
Oh, Marion, you had to go and get yourself kidnapped.
But I really do like her inclusion, even if she's just here for the wedding at the end. But for now, after the Russians get more information about the rest of the Skull's Temple location, Indy, Mutt, and Marion make their escape, but it's cut short because Indy and Marion get caught in quicksand. While Mutt looks for something to grab onto, Marion reveals that he's Indy's son, and, well, here's an interaction that happened earlier.
What do you do for money?
Fix motorcycles.
Gonna do that for the rest of your life?
Maybe I will. Teach, you got a problem with that?
No. Not if that's what you love doing. Don't let anybody tell you different.
And here's Indy's reaction to this news.
He's your son.
My son?
Henry Jones III.
Why the hell didn't you make him finish school?
I also like how Indy has to grab a snake in order to get out of the sand, but it's worth pointing out that the snake would absolutely snap if it had to carry Indy's weight. But I like the snake thing because this joke was funny.
Grab the snake! I'm calling it that! It's a snake, what do you want me to call it? Say rope! What? Say grab the rope! Grab the rope!
Once we make it to the next morning, we are officially watching a different movie. The first half of the movie was, well, mostly grounded in reality, but the second half cranks up the silliness to 11. This isn't an Indiana Jones movie anymore. This is a Looney Tunes movie. Now we got this big ass sci-fi machine that completely destroys any tree in its path. Giant killer ants, Mutt swinging around in the trees like fucking Tarzan. The absolute silliest deaths I've ever seen in a movie, and the gang eventually go to fucking Splash Mountain. I could not stop laughing during the second half of the movie. This is not a movie anymore. This is a video game. Okay. Let's all calm down. Let's take a breather and talk about the things that I do like. For one, Indy, Marion, and Mutt's bickering was actually pretty funny. The chemistry is still on point, and the presence of the Russian soldier getting increasingly annoyed just added to the comedy. I also like how Oxley used the skull to control the giant ants, forming a little arena around Indy and the Brute of the Week. Okay, movie's almost over. Time for our gang to enter the temple. After a couple of booby traps, Mac acts annoying again, and they find a throne room with more skulls. What happens next? Oh boy. So, Irana puts the skull on the headless skeleton. The temple starts to spin and gradually speed up. Then the skeletons start to merge together, and an alien, interdimensional being, gives her too much knowledge, so she starts to burn up and die. All while the gang make their escape from the temple, which we later see is a fucking flying saucer that launches back into space. Also, Mac dies, and they try to get us to care, but we still don't care. At least the resolution was cool. I like the subtle reference to Henry Sr., and the writing is still really good. And as I mentioned before, this movie ends with Indy getting married to Marion, which is a great way to end Indy's story. We also get to see Oxley not as a weird hobo anymore. As the wind blows the iconic fedora into the church, Mutt picks it up, and he's about to put it on, but his dad snatches it, signifying that maybe Mutt could take up the mantle, but not yet. So yeah, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I know that plenty of people hate it, and I guess I can see why they might, but I do have a soft spot for it. Yeah, it can be extremely stupid and ugly at times, but if you look past that, this movie still retains most of the things we all love about classic Indiana Jones. The heart of this movie is still character interaction. The emotion and the comedy are both centered around it, and some of the comedy is probably unintentional, but fuck it, I still found it really funny. Overall, I think Last Crusade is still a better movie and conclusion overall, but this movie evolved Indy's character in a neat way by making him the father this time, and it's not a bad conclusion to the saga. I know it's not perfect, but if you don't really like this movie, I highly suggest that you give it another chance. Now, I know I said this was a nice ending to the series, but all that shit's ruined due to the fact that this isn't the ending. We got one more movie left, which is the only one that I have not seen. Until now.
This is the most obnoxious thing I've ever experienced in my life.
I'm not gonna go that in depth about behind the scenes or any of that shit because it's actually fairly simple this time. George and Steven had some ideas about Dial of Destiny, and when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they decided to take those ideas and fuck up Indiana Jones because they already ran Star Wars into the ground at this point. Now, before I talk about the movie, I just need to get something off my chest. It might be a little controversial, so get ready. Harrison Ford is fucking old.
Why are you fucking here, man? You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
It's no secret that Ford's charismatic personality is part of what made the original movies so special, but this series isn't about a charismatic young guy anymore. We're following your old asshole grandpa now. Then it really sucks how Harrison Ford is just like, when I die, the character dies too. Sorry, man. I think you're cool and all, but that's fucking stupid. This IP is something special and they could be doing so much more with it, but for some reason it's shackled to Harrison Ford. I really think they should just reboot this series already. After all, it was sort of inspired by James Bond, so just double down on that by rebooting Indy with a different, younger, charismatic actor. I mean, just look at the Uncharted games. Imagine if Nathan Drake wore that fedora. You don't need Harrison Ford to make an Indiana Jones movie. You just need the hat, the whip, the charisma, interesting concepts for the time period or the MacGuffin, and the John Williams theme rearranged like when they couldn't get him for the Harry Potter sequels. Damn it, why'd I have to bring up Harry Potter again? But yeah, it sucks that they keep Indy tired, dead inside, and locked in Harrison Ford's basement. And we haven't even started talking about the movie. Ah yes. The Disney 100 logo. This movie's gonna be so bad. We cut to a flashback to Indy in his prime during World War II. When I said this series is shackled to Ford, do you really need more proof than that? Anyway, as many people have already pointed out, the de-aging technology is actually not that bad, but I can't say the same thing about his voice.
Got a lot of nice stuff.
Anyway, people swear by this scene, saying it's the best scene in the movie. This is Indy during his prime, and it feels just like classic Indiana Jones. It's definitely the most tolerable scene in the movie, so it's the best scene by technicality. Now can you imagine how bad the rest of the movie is? Anyway, what happens is that Indy is trying to stop the Nazis from stealing more artifacts, as usual. It's nearing the end of the war, and they mention Hitler is in hiding, so the Nazis are desperately trying to find a magic artifact to turn the tide in their favor. Watching this scene, you can already tell that the movie just feels off. The directing style is pretty different from the predecessors, and it just comes off as a cheap knockoff rather than, you know, a fucking Indiana Jones movie. Anyway, the Nazis have captured Indy, and they're about to hang him, which makes no sense. Why couldn't they just shoot him? Whatever. The specific artifact the Nazis have in their possession is the Lance of Longinus. That sounds like a cool MacGuffin for the movie, but nah. It's something infinitely less interesting. Indy's execution is cut short once a bomb from the Allied forces drops in the middle of the room, which theoretically should kill everyone in the room, including Indy, but at this point the film makes it clear the kind of movie it'll be, and that movie is dumb as hell. Indy came to the mission with his friend Basil, who gets captured, put on a train, and interrogated. Indy chases after the train before boarding it. Also, it should be noted that this movie looks like fucking shit. Remember how colorful the Lucas Spielberg movies were? Now everything has the fucking Disney Plus lighting. Everything is either ugly orange or ugly blue, and the action is also really shitty. It's really hard to get invested in this movie when it looks desaturated, and the introductory scene just doesn't have the same spice as the original movies. This movie can also get a little absurd. At least the absurdity in Crystal Skull was fucking funny, but this is just boring. Also, the brilliant comedy of the others have been replaced by Marvel humor.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
Would you believe me if I told you I couldn't finish this movie in one sitting? So anyway, the Nazis notice a bullet hole in Indy's uniform before attempting to chase after him, and once Indy gives them the slip, he notices that the lance is fake. See, the Nazis don't have the lance in their possession, but rather the main MacGuffin in this movie, the Antikythera. You know, that very real and very rusty clock-like mechanism invented by Archimedes that doesn't have any mystical properties to it in any myth or legend at all. This movie even mentions that the Antikythera itself isn't magic, but the significance of it is much stupider, but we will get to that later. Now, Indy finally rescues Basil and they make it to the top of the train. We see that the train is constantly being bombed by the Allied forces, and not one person gets hit in this dumb explosive fuckfest. So now the guy who tried to hang Indy earlier is gonna have an epic fight against him with the lance, which also makes no sense because he can just shoot him with a gun, which is something that he tries to do later. Okay, sure. Also, why do the Allies stop bombing when Indy wins the fight? How does the main villain survive getting hit by a metal bar in the face on top of a moving train? Why doesn't he have a horribly disfigured face, or at the very least a scar, because of that blow to the face? I really don't want to nitpick, but this movie's forcing my hand. Oh wait, the Allies start to bomb the train again? What? So anyway, after the train is stopped, Indy and Basil walk out of the scene to victory. Before the bad guy got defeated, Indy gave him the Antikythera, but here we see that he still has it. So whatever. Okay, now we cut to the present. It's 1969, which means we're staggeringly close to the release date for Star Wars. Not that that's important, I thought it was kind of funny. But what isn't funny is Indy's current situation. Remember the ending to the previous movie? He got married, he was reunited with his son, and this all gave his life new meaning after he saw that life was taking things away from him. It seems like life isn't done with that because now Indy's living in a shitty New York apartment, divorced, depressed, and sleeping in his underwear on a recliner before his noisy neighbors wake him up and he decides to shut them up with a baseball bat. And if that wasn't enough, his son is nowhere to be found. That's a whole can of worms on its own, but for now we have a major problem with this movie. Indy himself is a fucking loser. Do the writers just not know where to take his character from the ending of Crystal Skull? Oh wait, I know why they did this. It's because legacy characters aren't allowed to be happy. Everyone has to be a depressed old hermit who looks like a sad old clown compared to the newer, more younger heroes. Luke Skywalker, fucking Bruce Wayne, Laurie Strode. No, I actually think Laurie isn't done too dirty in the newer Halloween movies. I think she's alright. I should probably talk about those movies too. Why do I keep getting off topic? Okay, so we already established that Indy's life has lost all meaning, and it's just hammered in when we see that his students, who used to love him, are now sleeping through his lectures. This is where we're introduced to a new character who I will call Will Round, because Willy and Short Round did the Dragon Ball Z fusion dance, and the result is an annoying character who's a little too good at everything. She starts off as a shitty person who leaves Indy, her godfather, to die. Yeah, she's Basil's daughter. And I guess I wouldn't mind if she showed a little growth as a character throughout the movie, which she doesn't. She comes off more like a villain if anything, but we're getting too ahead of ourselves. Next we have some students roll in a TV with a broadcast of the moon landing. This would actually be an interesting theme to explore. No one is taking an interest in archaeology, especially since it's the start of a massive cultural shift with all the space exploration stuff making everyone more interested in science fiction than anything. Seeing how Indy deals with the changing time period and seeing how he somehow overcomes it would be interesting to see unfold, but as we already know, Dial of Destiny is allergic to good ideas, so this theme is never brought up again. Good job. After class is over, Indy is throwing a retirement party and he's given a clock, and he immediately gives it away to a homeless person. He then goes to a bar to get drunk before running into Will Round, who tells him she's his goddaughter. She proposes to find the other half of Archimedes' dial so she can become famous and Indy can go on one last adventure. Meanwhile, we get our reintroduction to the main villain, Voller. He's been working with the US government for the past 20 years, which is surprising because he's very openly racist towards this guy.
Where are you from?
The Bronx, sir.
No, I mean, originally, your people.
Will there be anything else?
You didn't win the war. Hitler lost it.
What? Voller sends the CIA to chase after Will Round since she's looking for the dial. Indy reveals that Basil was researching the dial and it can apparently predict time portals in the sky caused by planetary movements.
You could predict fissures in time.
That doesn't make any sense.
Also earlier, the Nazis just start rummaging through Indy's office and they kill people. Because
no witnesses.
Motherfucker, you're supposed to be the CIA. Act like it. Also, Indy doesn't even let the CIA speak before doing more Uncharted bullshit. Once Indy makes it to the offices and he sees the murder victims, he puts his hand on a corpse and he starts to call the police. But then the CIA captures him, and because he touches the corpse, he got blood on his hands. And later on, he's wanted for murder. That's right, folks. Indiana Jones has gone senile. The CIA is also incompetent as hell, since they can't seem to drive through the moon landing parade and the following protesters. The protesters allow Indy to escape, attempting to alert the local PD about the murders, but he just ignores him, so Indy steals his horse and gallops into the subway. Later that night, Indy sees that he's wanted for murder, and someone recognizes him before Sala makes an MCU-ass introduction. Yeah, Sala's back, and he's completely wasted. He's only in 2 scenes in the entire movie, even when they advertise him everywhere, and he's really only here for exposition. It's super weird. And this scene is especially stupid. I do not like this scene. So Sala drives Indy to the airport so Indy can chase after Will Round before she sells the dial to the black market. Sala gives Indy the iconic outfit and he teases that he's gonna be coming along for this adventure.
I also brought my passport. I could help you. Indy, I miss the desert. I miss the sea. and I miss waking up every morning wondering what wonderful adventure the new day will bring to us.
And after all that shit, Indy tells him to fuck off, and Sala yells his name in the middle of a public airport when he's wanted for murder.
This is not an adventure, Sala.
And if that wasn't enough, the scene ends with MCU humor. After a flashback of Indy trying to help Basil take the dial away from him, we make it to Tangier, where we meet a dollar store short round who's playing on a cardboard airplane kit. This is literally only to set up a scene where he flies a plane in the climax, and he never actually does anything airplane related ever again. Come to think about it, he doesn't really do anything in this movie at all, except maybe be annoying.
The Wright brothers were born during the Civil War.
Oh, I thought maybe you went to school with them.
Oh, come on, Indy. That was funny.
No, you ain't!
Also, it should be said that I'm strictly criticizing the characters, not the actors. I already brought this mindset up in my Knuckles video, but I'm gonna do it again to really hammer it in. So, yeah, I'm not one of those people who engages in online harassment because they play a shitty character. People who do that are just as annoying. But anyway, Voller makes it to Tangier, and we get a line that definitely shouldn't be in a movie set in 1969.
This relic is my property.
It's not yours. You stole it.
Then you stole it.
And then I stole it. It's called capitalism.
After more chasing, we find out that the hotel Wilrand was trying to sell the dial at is owned by her ex-fiancé mobster boss, who shows up and joins the chase. You know, as if she wasn't already unlikable enough. And if it wasn't already apparent, Indy feels like a side character who needs to be dragged from scene to scene.
Well, I'm not the one that's engaged to a mobster!
I don't need morality lessons from an aging grave robber!
Oh my god, shut the fuck up. After Wilrand tells us how amazing she is instead of showing it, the chase ends as the Nazis are still in pursuit on an airplane before they kill the CIA lady. So she was basically inconsequential to the narrative. How am I still finding flaws in this movie? Okay, who directed this movie? James Mangold. What else did he do? Wait, what? Okay, now the good guys are going to Greece to find the coordinates for the other half of the dial. In order to do this, they need help from a diver played by Puss in Boots.
So this is where dignity goes to die.
Later, Indy and Wilrun discuss Basil's notes before Indy says something on par with somehow Palpatine returned.
Now you believe the dial has magical powers?
I don't believe in magic, Wombat.
And if that somehow wasn't enough, we finally hear what happened to Mutt. Mutt decided to enlist in the Vietnam War to piss Indy off. He died, and Indy and Marion couldn't handle the grief, so they got a divorce. Okay, for one, Mutt would never do that. He just wanted to fix motorcycles and not finish college in the last movie. He wouldn't be the type of guy just to casually enlist in war to piss off his dad. Speaking of which, Indy should be overjoyed that Mutt is enlisting. Indy has fought for his country constantly, so how the hell would this piss him off? Third, if they really wanted to distance themselves from Crystal Skull, why can't you just mention that Mutt moved away or something? But nah, let's just kill him off in the dumbest way possible. It's gonna be great. I can't even appreciate Harrison Ford's 10 out of 10 acting because the scene has 0 out of 10 logic. Congratulations, James Man Tits. It's crazy how Temple of Doom is better than this movie. Okay, now they dive for the thingy, they find the coordinates, and they get attacked by eels. The Nazis cut this dude's air supply off, and he forgot he's supposed to be a professional scuba diver, so he sinks to the bottom of the sea and dies. But then Wilrund, the non-professional scuba diver, activates her life raft and she floats to the surface, where she gets captured. Up next, we learn that Indy has learned absolutely nothing from the best scene in the series.
The Grail is mine, and you're going to get it for me.
Shooting me won't get you anywhere.
You know something, Dr. Jones? You're absolutely right.
Read it, please.
No.
That's right, folks. Indiana Jones has gone senile. So now Wilrund translates the code for the bad guys because of course she does, but then she lights a stick of dynamite and gets away on the other boat before she finally experiences a rare moment of regret. After Indy melts the wax casing, they head off to find the other dial half in Archimedes' tomb, which is inside the ear of Dionysius, a very public tourist attraction. I'm convinced the writers are just stupid. Once they make it there, Discount Shorty decides to get an ice cream cone before he gets kidnapped while Indy and Wilrund continue their quest.
You haven't been forced to drink the blood of Kali, or been tortured with voodoo.
I don't believe in magic, Wombat.
Or been tortured with voodoo.
I don't believe in magic.
Tortured with voodoo.
I don't believe in magic.
Tortured with voodoo.
I believe in magic.
After they open a secret passage with the water displacement method, the Nazis look for the good guys and the kid escapes, drowning this guy in the process, making this the one Indiana Jones movie without a climactic fight against a brute. We also see that Archimedes' tomb foreshadows the dumbest thing in the movie, but again, we will get to that later. For now, the Nazis corner the good guys and take the other half of the dial, allowing it to predict rifts in time, which is still stupid as hell. Afterward, the kid ambushes Voller and we get a small shootout that ends with Indy being shot in the chest. So, he's dead now, right? He's like 70 years old. No? He's still alive? Okay. And I guess Voller takes him to go see what he's cooking, even though he really has no reason to and he could just leave him for dead. But anyway, Willround and Stupid Kid escape to rescue Indy from the Nazis. Willround gets on board the plane after chasing it via a motorcycle, and the kid flies a plane even though it had literally no build-up other than him playing a cardboard toy earlier. Next, Voller finally explains his plan to Indy, which is going back in time to assassinate Hitler and steer the Nazis to victory, which seems interesting. But then you remember that this means Indiana Jones has to save Hitler. But anyway, a time portal opens up in the sky and they time travel back to 1939.
Continental drift!
Wait, what?
Archimedes didn't know about continental drift.
But, Indy, didn't you establish earlier that the time portals open up due to planetary movements? Whatever, the calculations were wrong for the stupidest reason possible, and now the portal takes them back to 214 BC. Naturally, this means that the Nazis should turn back to the present since they're in the wrong time period. What? Huh? What? Why are you shooting them? What are you trying to achieve? Earlier, this fucking idiot was the guy who specifically said no witnesses, and now he's carelessly ignoring that to the extent that it should entirely alter the course of history. What did he think he was trying to accomplish? And why is the 70-year-old man who's bleeding to death still alive? It's been like 10 minutes. Let's just finish this piece of shit already. So the plane gets shot down by spears, all the Nazis die, and Indy and Willround parachute to the ground. Archimedes takes Voller's watch, allowing him to finish the dial. Here, Indy briefly talks with Archimedes before deciding that he wants to rest here and watch history unfold as he passes away. Honestly, as much as I bitched and complained over the course of the movie, I think Indy dying as he watches history play its course is a neat way to kill him off. It's kind of poetic, and I'm surprised they're actually gonna go through with this.
I need to do this.
Me too.
Okay, never mind. You ruined it. Okay, now we see that Indy is back in his shitty apartment, all bandaged up. Marion comes back and she says this.
Someone told me you were back. Are you back, Indy?
That implies that she didn't get a divorce because her son died and she couldn't handle the grief like Indy mentioned earlier. Rather, she left because he was sad? This makes Marion seem like a fucking asshole. Afterward, we get a quiet scene of Indy and Marion embracing each other with a callback to that one scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. If nothing else, I thought the ending to this actual 0 out of 10 movie was ever so slightly okay. Who am I kidding? This makes me feel nothing. So yeah, now we're left with 5 Indiana Jones movies, each indicative of the time period they came out in. You have a trilogy of well put together movies with arguably varying quality, but it brought us compelling moments and an unforgettable ending. Next, you have a continuation that might be a little unnecessary with plenty of its own flaws, but it still delivered that classic feeling and evolved the character in a good way. And now you have an ugly, washed out, and unfocused assembly line movie that takes one of the greatest movie heroes of all time and rips away his happy ending, turning him into a sad, empty shell of his former self. It's humiliating to see the series go out on a wet fart rather than a triumphant bang. They really didn't have to make this, but with proper retooling, it would have made for at least a decent movie on its own. But as it stands, the movie is just boring. While his other adventures stand the test of time and will be adored for generations, this one will most likely be a relic of the past. So, fuck you, Disney. You ruined my favorite film franchise.
Do you have the slightest idea how little that narrows it down?
Well, I gotta admit, this retrospective has definitely made me appreciate this series more. I think all these movies have at least something going for them. Hell, I'm starting to miss Temple of Doom, but my aim is getting better.
You see, it's funny because Temple of Doom is terrible.
It's been a fun journey. I laughed, I got pissed off, I drew all these sprites, and this ended up being my longest video so far, so there's that. As for the future of this series, who knows, man. Maybe they really are finished for good this time. Maybe it'll migrate to the realm of gaming with more games after the Great Circle. Maybe they will take my idea and reboot the series with a new continuity. All I know is that Indiana Jones is kind of my hero. He's a symbol of appreciating the past, and it's ironic how most people are doing just that when they rewatch his movies over and over again. Simply put, Indiana Jones was, and always will be, timeless. That was a long talk. You're such a good listener. And just in time, too. We finally made it.